Hello everybody. Thank you for all your comments for today's Ask Elvis. Hello, my name's Elvis. Hello! Roll the sting. Hello, what's up guys? Thanks for all your comments for this week's Ask Elvis. Roll the sting. Roll the sting!
Oi, what's going on here? Get out of it, cheeky. Get off to school. Hey, what's up guys? Hope you had a great weekend. Thank you very much for all your comments and questions for this week's Ask Elvis. Roll the sting. Right. Here we go. John Norris starts us off and he says, what are the chances that the power unit rule changes for 2021 will be pushed back a few years? Well, John, I don't think they will be pushed back at all. I don't think they can be. If you remember, Liberty set out a very public statement about 2021. Way back at the beginning of 2018 they did this. In fact, this is what it looked like. And if you look very closely at one of the objectives they set out to achieve there, it said that when referring to the power unit regulations, that they need to be attractive to new entrants. So they set out with this big idea of making them cheaper, making them much more simple, making it much easier for a new entrant, a new manufacturer to come into the sport. And we had lots of interest, didn't we? We had Aston Martin showing interest. We had Porsche showing serious interest, even going to the lengths of creating single-cylinder dyno testing facilities at Porsche to run through what they thought they could achieve within the 2021 proposed engine regulations or power unit regulations. Since then though, everything's changed because all the current manufacturers in Formula One have all got together, as they always do. They've all fought back against these proposed changes which were there for the good of the sport. They've all got their own interests as ever, and they've all decided that they want to stick with pretty much what we have now. We know there are going to be some changes, but the overall kind of base model looks very similar to what we currently have. And that means that we've had the likes of Porsche, the likes of Aston Martin, walk away. They've already come out and said that they're actually less and less interested in joining Formula One with the way the proposals look now. So when you look back at that statement from Liberty, where one of their main objectives was to create something attractive to new entrants, to new manufacturers, doesn't look like we're going to achieve it, does it? The answer to the question is I don't think they'll be able to push it back, because 2021 is this big date when everything is changing, because the current agreements, the current kind of Concord agreement is what, as it's known, comes to an end at the end of 2020. So things have to change in 2021. It's a fresh start. That's when they have to bring this stuff in. I just don't think it's going to be as dramatic as we perhaps thought and lots of people hoped it would be. Cohen van der Rijt says, hey Mark, Dr. Helmut Marko said, if the Honda project fails, there is a fair chance that Red Bull leaves F1. With the news from John Todd, there will be no new companies producing engines, as we just said. I think they're indeed in a tight spot for a supplier if the Honda engine fails. What are your thoughts on this matter? Is this the same kind of posturing like Marchionni sometimes used? So, yes, is the answer. It is the same kind of posturing. I mean, how many times have we heard Red Bull say they're going to leave F1 if things don't work out? However, I got to say, I think there's definitely some truth in it. I don't think that Red Bull are saying these things just for the sake of controversy. I genuinely think there's a feeling at Red Bull that they've spent so much money on the Formula One project, and it's been incredibly successful for Red Bull as a brand. But I think there's a feeling now that actually, is it worth the amount of money they're having to spend for what they're getting in return in terms of success on the racetrack? And with the difficulties of modern Formula One and the way that, you know, you can clearly see it through Christian Horner's rhetoric in front of a camera, they're frustrated. They're not, you know, they're frustrated because they're not winning, of course, but they're frustrated with the way that Formula One operates and the way the governance is, the way that decisions are made, or more importantly, not made. And I think that there's a definite feeling that there is a potential, sale of Red Bull coming along, and I think that could be that either Red Bull or the Toro Rosso team gets sold, perhaps to Honda. Perhaps one of the other one could get sold to somebody like Aston Martin. If they want to come along as a branding exercise and name a car an Aston Martin car rather than becoming an engine supplier. So I think that those kind of conversations are definitely going on at Red Bull, and I think that if they find that the Honda partnership doesn't bear pretty immediate or pretty quick fruit and sort of almost instant success, and when I talk about success I mean proper success, greater than they're having right now with the occasional win, there's definitely an opportunity or definitely a possibility rather, that I could see Red Bull as a manufacturer leaving this sport. So I think it's a real threat. I think it is a threat. We've heard it many times before. Same kind of thing with Ferrari. If they don't get their own way, they're leaving. But I kind of think that with Red Bull's case, it's a different situation. They could very easily leave F1 as a manufacturer, still start sponsoring cars for far less money, and get, as I say, similar exposure, similar brand awareness in this big global sport of ours. Stuart Grindley says, what would be your opinion on Ferrari owing Fernando one last chance in a decent car after having 4 years with an awful car after car, almost as an apology for nearly landing 2 World Drivers titles? I don't think Ferrari would see it that way. I don't think Ferrari see it that they owe Fernando anything, really. I think, yes, they came very close, and yes, there are a number of reasons why Fernando did not win a world title at Ferrari. Large part of that was that the car just wasn't good enough. But I also think that Fernando's relationship with Ferrari internally, when he left that team, was not great. And I don't think that they would particularly want to have him back, let alone owe him anything. So, no, I can't see that happening. And no, I don't think Ferrari would even feel like they owe him any second chances or anything like that, I'm afraid. Potato says, how difficult will it be for McLaren in 2019 with all the changes they're going through, from a change in structure to a whole new driver lineup, and what are some of the challenges that they might face? Well, yes, on one hand you can say that there's so many changes going on, that provides a number of challenges, because you've got to work together as a team, most importantly in Formula 1, and when you've got so many new elements to that team, it can take time for those elements to gel. So drivers working with engineers can take time to form a relationship, to form a bond, to understand exactly how each other works. When you're talking about relationships with drivers and engineers, the driver will give feedback when he gets out the car. The engineer needs to completely know and understand exactly what the driver's saying, and that's not always as simple as it sounds. As with any communication between humans, there is a certain amount of ambiguity to it sometimes, and so the engineer and driver need to start to really understand each other and be almost in tune with each other. So when the driver says something, sometimes the engineer has to read between the lines to understand exactly what that might mean, and those kind of things definitely take time to build up. However, having said that, Lando Norris has already worked with some of those McLaren engineers for some time now in different roles, so I think that's a head start. I think Carlos Sainz is now, you can't regard him as a rookie. He's not he's not an inexperienced driver anymore. So I think the experience that he brings from 2 other teams, let's not forget, will also be invaluable, because when you get somebody coming in, and this will be the same with other people that are joining McLaren, not only do you face the challenges of integrating them into the McLaren system, but you benefit from the experience that they've had at other organisations. You're tapping into a little bit of knowledge of how other people do things a certain way, and that can be just as valuable as anything else. So I think McLaren are at a stage where, yes, they're having a bit of a reset, and they are certainly looking like they're putting in positive things in place in terms of rebuilding or building for the future, and that's the important thing at McLaren. I think there's been a mindset change recently. There's a new humility to the team. They've understood that they've made mistakes. I think they're realising what some of those mistakes are, and they're now putting things in place for a long-term future, people that can rebuild that organisation. So lots of real positives, and I think that will far outweigh the negatives. Whether it sort of brings instant success next year, that's unlikely, but they're not looking to that. They've now changed their viewpoint in that they realise they have to start from scratch almost. an acceptance of where they are in the pecking order, they now need to build a way back up to the top. And the changes they're making, including the driver lineup, I think are a good way to start doing that. On the subject of McLaren, Shailesh Maskari has this question about the James Key deal. He says, do you have any inside news on the James Key deal? It was rumoured last weekend that Red Bull wanted to include Lando Norris in the James Key deal, but now that Lando's joining McLaren, will the deal fall through? Or maybe McLaren are using Stoffel as a bargain to make the deal, with Stoffel going to Toro Rosso. What do you think about the same, and what do you feel about the prospect of Key joining McLaren this year? So first of all, I think yes, initially Toro Rosso were trying to use the trying to bargain Lando Norris against James Key, and it's not about whether James Key can join McLaren, because he's out of contract next year, so he can do what he wants at that point. The issue, certainly from McLaren's perspective, is they want James Key to start immediately. They want him to be involved in next year's car, which means bringing him in as soon as possible. To enable that to happen, Toro Rosso wanted to have Lando Norris join their squad. McLaren valued Lando too greatly, and as we now know, he's now confirmed as a race driver, and that's part of all of this. So they said no. That meant that Toro Rosso said, well, okay, you can't have James Key for now either then. But I still think he will join McLaren. It's just the starting point is going to now be delayed, and we're probably not going to see him join McLaren until next year. Whether they can reach some kind of deal that brings him over the off-season, or whether we need to wait until the middle of next year to have him officially start, don't yet know. But these things are normally worked out. Normally a bit of cash can change hands, or another person can go in the opposite direction. There are normally ways to grease the wheels of these deals. So I still think James Key will join McLaren. I think he's a great appointment for McLaren, part of that rebuilding process. I think they're building a very, very strong team in the background at McLaren, and once it's all gelled together, I think it can be a very successful team. So McLaren fans, lots to be positive about. I think you might just have to wait a bit longer though for James Key to be able to join and show any kind of input into McLaren's 2019 car. Right, I've got to pop out, so we'll do some more of these on the road. Tom Bowen says, do you think it would ever be possible for a team like Sauber or Haas, that are basically B teams, to start outperforming the main team, i.e. Ferrari? Or would Ferrari use its relationship with those two teams to somehow limit its performance? First of all, it's highly unlikely that over the course of a season, a team like Sauber or Haas would outperform Ferrari over the entire season, much more so because of the budgetary disparity between those two teams, much more than anything else. So within the current situation we have in Formula 1, it's a highly unlikely situation to happen. But if it did happen, there are only limited things that Ferrari, if we take that example, could do to limit their performance. Of course, they could restrict them in some ways with the engine, i.e. give them the lowest performing engine out of the batch of engines that they supply. They have to supply the same equipment. The rules now state that Ferrari have to supply the same equipment to their customer teams that they do with their factory-based team. Ferrari have the ability to create more performance from things like their oil supplier, Shell, for example. That's outside of those regulations with their customer teams. So there are ways that Ferrari can create more performance than their customer teams, but it's very difficult for them to actually limit the performance of those teams out on track. Molu3 says, with Max Verstappen's on-track antics, do you think any of the other big teams would ever want to employ him? Yes, 100%. I think what Max brings to a team far outweighs any of the potential negatives with his kind of hot-headedness and what some people are deeming as mistakes on track. So yes, 100%. They'd all be clambering over each other to get hold of him if he was available. Andre Summers says, we got into a bit of an argument here, so we need an authoritative answer. Well, Andre, look no further. There is nobody more authoritative than me. I mean, just ask these two. Hey Pharrell, come here. Look at that. That is authoritative at its best. Wilson, stand up. Yeah, okay. So, Andre says, are teams allowed to do setup changes to a car after they first go out in Q1 other than front wing adjustments? The answer to that, Andre, is an authoritative no. So no, front wing adjustments, and that's just in terms of the flap angle, are the only thing allowed. So once the car leaves the garage, enters the pit lane in Q1, it is then in parc ferme, which means those restrictions then apply. The only exception to that is if there's a change in climatic conditions. You know, for example, if it's dry in qualifying and then wet for the race, they are allowed to make changes to things like brake ducts and cooling and that sort of thing. But setup changes, absolutely not allowed. Hope that's authoritative enough for you. And finally, Stefan78 says this. Could the current F1 engines be converted to run as hydrogen internal combustion engines so they run on H2, hydrogen gas? Well, the literal answer to that question is yes, they could, because you can convert pretty much any. Most of the petrol-driven combustion engines out on the road can be converted to run on hydrogen gas. It's expensive to do because you pretty much need to change everything in the engine. You need harden the valves and valve seats. You need to strengthen things like conrods, the whole bottom end of the engine. Cylinder head gaskets need to be made of substantially stronger material because the combustion pressures are so much greater. You need a completely different injector system because you're injecting gas, not liquid. The spark plug and ignition systems would need a complete overhaul. So pretty much you're changing everything internally, which makes it a very expensive conversion to do, but you can do it. Now, would we ever do it in Formula 1? Absolutely not, for a couple of reasons. First of all, we never convert anything just to make do in Formula 1. If we created a set of regulations that said we're going to start running hydrogen internal combustion engines, you'd have a complete revamp of the rules. The teams would go from scratch to design something that's purposely and specifically built to maximise those regulations, you know, to build the very best hydrogen internal combustion engine that we could do. The other reason it will never happen in Formula 1 is we will never go down the hydrogen route, and that's because Formula 1 is at this weird crossroads. Right? What do we do for the future of Formula 1? If we want to follow the road car industry, the road car industry is not going down the hydrogen route. Not even the hydrogen fuel cell route, which is a different proposition to a hydrogen internal combustion engine. It's not going to go that way because full battery electric cars have already stolen a march on hydrogen technology in terms of where the road car market is going. Pretty much every manufacturer now is fully invested in battery electric EVs for the future, and not too far in the future. So that means that if we're going to follow the road car route, we've got to go electric. We can't go fully electric because Formula E has this contract that locks them out as the sort of exclusive full electric single-seater FIA championship for many, many years into the future. So what do? They're in this hybrid phase right now. Do we continue with that? Because at some point hybrid will be phased out in the wider world and full electric will be taking over. And that's not a million miles further down the line. Or do we completely ignore the road car side of things and go back to full gas guzzling, loud, noisy, fast, V8, V10 engines that loads of people, I know so many of you would love to see. Don't get me wrong, I loved that era of Formula 1 as well. So we're at this crossroads where no one quite knows what the future of F1 will be and what it will hold, but I'm pretty sure it will not be hydrogen internal combustion engines. I hope that sort of answers your question. Anyway, there's a wider debate to be had about what the future of F1 does hold, and maybe we'll come back to that. Anyway, for now, thank you so much, guys, for all your questions. Again, really always appreciate them. I hope you've enjoyed some of the answers to those, and if you want to have a further discussion, pop some comments. If you disagree with me, absolutely fine. Pop some comments in the boxes below and we'll get into that discussion in the comments section. For now though, thanks very much. Please like the video if you have enjoyed it. Share it around, share it with your mates. And if you're not a subscriber already, why not? Hit that subscribe button. Hit it down there. Subscribe, you'll never miss another one. So thank you very much for now, and I will see you next time.